I was in the kitchen, humming a soft tune, the scent of garlic and rosemary filling the small, sunlit space. The counter was a mess. Cutting boards stacked with vegetables, a little spill of olive oil near the stove, and the kettle whistling softly on the burner. I had just started browning some chicken when the doorbell rang. Normally, I would have ignored it. We weren't expecting anyone. But something made me wipe my hands on a towel and peek through the peephole. It was Jonathan, my husband's friend from college. He hadn't been over in years, and the sight of him standing there, slightly awkward, yet with that familiar easy smile, sent a strange flutter through me. I opened the door, trying to mask my surprise. "Hey, I hope I'm not interrupting," he said, stepping in before I could answer properly. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop by. Can I help with anything?" His voice was warm, genuine, and there was an undercurrent of something else, something I couldn't place at first. I laughed nervously, gesturing toward the chaos on the counter. "You sure you don't mind getting in the way of my culinary disaster?" He chuckled, but instead of stepping back, he moved closer, picking up a knife to help slice some vegetables. There was a natural ease to the way he fit into the kitchen, like he belonged there in some strange, familiar way. I felt a sudden awareness of him, a tension that was not uncomfortable but undeniably electric. As we worked side by side, I noticed the little details, the way his hands moved deliberately, the quiet attentiveness in his gaze, the way he asked questions about the recipe that showed more curiosity than mere politeness. I found myself sharing stories I hadn't thought about in years, memories of Jonathan and my husband, old college jokes, the small, poignant details of their friendship. And somehow, sharing those moments with Jonathan now, in this intimate, sun-dappled kitchen, felt different. Then, just as I was stirring the sauce and humming a particularly nostalgic tune, he said something that made me freeze mid-motion. Something I never expected. His words weren't shocking in a scandalous sense, but they carried a weight of truth, a kind of vulnerability that caught me off guard. He said, I'd always wondered if I missed getting to know you better, beyond all those stories about him." I blinked, my heart skipping a beat. The room seemed smaller, warmer, charged with an intimacy I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't inappropriate, not in any crude sense, but deeply human, a moment of connection that made me question the boundaries I had set for myself. That night, the kitchen became more than a place to cook. It became a space of quiet revelation, where laughter mingled with lingering glances and simple gestures. Handing him a bowl, passing the salt, felt loaded with unspoken meaning. I realized that sometimes the most unexpected encounters are the ones that show us hidden parts of ourselves, parts we thought were buried under routine and comfort. And just like that, one ordinary Thursday had the potential to change the way I thought about friendship, trust, and the quiet power of connection. After Jonathan arrived, the rest of the evening unfolded in a way I couldn't have anticipated. Dinner, which I had intended to be a simple, quiet meal for my husband and me, became a lively conversation in our little sunlit kitchen. The scent of rosemary and garlic mixed with the faint aroma of baked bread, and somehow the house felt warmer, more alive. We moved seamlessly around each other, chopping, stirring, and occasionally bumping elbows, which always made us laugh. There was a comfort in his presence, a familiarity that made it easy to forget he hadn't been over in years. And yet, every so often, I caught myself glancing at him and noticing subtle things I hadn't before. The slight crease at the corner of his eyes when he smiled, the thoughtful pause he took before responding to a question, the way he really listened instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. When the chicken was finally on the table and the wine poured, we settled in the living room. The soft lamplight cast a golden glow over the room, highlighting the worn pages of the books on the shelves and the photographs of our travels on the wall. Jonathan recounted stories of our college days, making me laugh out loud at memories I had almost forgotten. His stories were not just funny. They carried warmth, a subtle vulnerability that made me realize how much I had missed seeing this side of him. At one point, our conversation shifted, as if pulled by some invisible thread. Jonathan leaned back in the armchair, his expression thoughtful. "You know," he said quietly, "I've always admired the way you handle things. You have this calm, grounded energy. It's rare." I felt a strange flush rise to my cheeks. Compliments from him were different. There was no hidden agenda, no casual politeness. It was genuine, and it stirred something inside me I hadn't expected. Thank you," I said softly, unsure how to articulate the mixture of surprise and appreciation I felt. We fell into a companionable silence, punctuated by the occasional clink of glasses. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly seen, not just as someone's wife, not just as a host, but as myself. The connection between us was subtle yet undeniable. It wasn't about desire in the obvious sense. It was about recognition, the quiet thrill of being understood and appreciated on a deeper level. Later, as he helped clear the dishes, I realized how natural it felt to be around him. There was trust, a shared sense of respect, and something else, a gentle curiosity that made ordinary moments feel extraordinary. I found myself lingering near him longer than necessary, enjoying the rhythm of our interaction, the easy way we fell into conversation and laughter without pretense. By the time Jonathan left, the night was deep and the house was quiet again. I walked him to the door and noticed the faint hesitation in his eyes, the way he lingered for a moment before stepping out into the cool night air. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or how this unexpected visit might change my life, but I knew one thing with certainty. I had discovered a side of myself I had almost forgotten existed, a side open to connection, to unexpected warmth, to the quiet possibility of something meaningful. As I closed the door and leaned against it, I realized that sometimes it's the unplanned moments that leave the deepest imprint. And in that imprint, I could feel the gentle beginnings of something transformative, something that would linger long after the kitchen lights were turned off. The next few days passed with a strange, lingering sense of anticipation. Jonathan's visit had left a mark I couldn't shake, a quiet awareness that something had shifted, though nothing had changed outwardly. I found myself replaying snippets of our conversation in my mind, the way he listened, the small compliments he gave, the pauses that felt filled with meaning. It was as if a door had opened that I hadn't realized was locked. A week later he called. Nothing formal, just a casual check-in, asking how I was and if my husband was keeping me busy. His voice, familiar and warm, made my heart skip in ways that surprised me. We talked for over an hour, laughing about old memories, sharing little triumphs and frustrations from our daily lives. It was comfortable, effortless, but underneath it all, I felt a quiet intensity, a connection that wasn't loud or obvious but undeniably present. When he suggested dropping by again, I hesitated only a moment before saying yes. Part of me wondered if I was stepping into dangerous territory, but another part, the part that had felt awakened in the kitchen that Thursday, urged me to see where this connection might lead. That evening the air was crisp, the golden light of sunset spilling into the kitchen as I prepared a simple pasta dinner. Jonathan arrived with a bottle of wine and a grin that made me feel both nervous and exhilarated. We slipped into our easy rhythm again, chopping vegetables, stirring sauce, talking and laughing. But tonight there was a subtle shift. The pauses between our words carried more weight, the glances lingered just a little longer, and every shared silence seemed to hum with unspoken understanding. As we moved to the living room with our plates, the conversation drifted toward dreams, regrets, and what we had learned from life so far. Jonathan spoke about his fears of missed opportunities, his quiet regrets about roads not taken, and I found myself sharing my own, those moments of compromise and caution that had shaped who I was. We were no longer just talking about the past. We were revealing ourselves, layer by layer, in a way that felt profoundly safe. At one point, he reached across the table to touch my hand lightly, not in a way that startled or threatened, but in a way that conveyed comfort, reassurance, and a subtle acknowledgement of the bond between us. My pulse quickened, and I realized that this simple gesture meant more than words ever could. It wasn't about romance in a conventional sense. It was about recognition, respect, and the quiet thrill of being truly seen. Later, as he helped clear the dishes, I watched him move through the kitchen with that same calm attentiveness I had noticed from the very first visit. I felt a deep gratitude for his presence, for the way he made me feel alive in small, unexpected ways. There was a tenderness in our connection, a gentle honesty that had grown from that first Thursday evening into something that felt rare and precious. By the time he left, the night was dark, and the house was still. I closed the door and leaned against it, heart still beating in that quiet, aware rhythm. I realized that what I had discovered with Jonathan was more than companionship. It was a reminder of my own capacity to feel, to connect, and to embrace moments of vulnerability without fear. The experience had awakened something in me that I thought was long buried, the courage to notice life's subtle magic, even in the most ordinary places. And in that stillness, I felt a sense of calm anticipation. Because whatever this connection would become, I knew I had stepped into a space where trust, respect, and genuine emotional intimacy could flourish. And that realization was a gift I hadn't expected, but would cherish deeply. The days after Jonathan's second visit passed quietly, but I carried a soft, persistent awareness of him with me. It wasn't longing in the traditional sense, nor was it confusion. It was something subtler, like the afterglow of sunlight that lingers even after the sun has set. I found myself noticing small details in my daily life more vividly. The hum of the kettle in the morning, the way the light hit the kitchen counter, even the gentle rhythm of my husband moving through the house. Everything felt slightly sharper, richer, more alive. One afternoon, Jonathan called again, suggesting we take a walk through the neighborhood park. The thought of seeing him in a different setting, away from the kitchen, made my heart lift in anticipation. When he arrived, he greeted me with the same warm smile, the same understated attentiveness, and together we wandered along winding paths, surrounded by the muted golds and reds of autumn leaves. The crisp air carried the scent of damp earth and falling leaves, and for a while we simply walked, letting conversation drift from mundane topics to the deeper corners of our lives. At some point, he paused and turned toward me, his expression serious but gentle. "You know," he said, "these visits, these conversations, they've made me realize how much I've missed out on by not paying attention to the quiet, meaningful connections in life." I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. I understood perfectly. "I think," I replied softly, "that sometimes the things we least expect are the ones that teach us the most about ourselves." We continued walking, and I noticed that our steps had synchronized, our presence comforting and grounding for one another. There was no rush, no urgency, only a calm, mutual awareness that we were sharing something rare, a moment of unspoken understanding that transcended labels or expectations. By the time we returned to the house, the sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the yard. Jonathan lingered at the door, and I felt a deep gratitude swell inside me. "Thank you," I said, meaning it in every sense. "For your friendship, for your honesty, for showing me that connection doesn't have to be complicated to be meaningful." He smiled, a mixture of warmth and quiet understanding. "And thank you," he said, "for letting me in, for showing me that these moments, they matter." After he left, I stood by the window, looking out at the fading light. My mind replayed the past few weeks, the laughter, the conversations, the small gestures, the quiet intimacy that had grown naturally and without pressure. I realized that life is often measured not by dramatic events, but by these subtle, transformative moments that quietly expand the heart. I thought about my husband, about Jonathan, and about myself. The experience had not changed my love for my family, nor had it crossed boundaries. Rather, it had reminded me that emotional connection, trust, and mutual respect are the threads that weave richness into everyday life. I felt more present, more awake, more willing to notice and cherish the quiet gifts that appear when we least expect them. As the evening settled into a calm hush, I felt a sense of peaceful clarity. Some encounters leave a mark not because they upend everything, but because they illuminate what was already inside us, waiting to be discovered. And in that illumination, I found a deeper appreciation for life, for human connection, and for the gentle, unexpected ways we can grow through one another.